I think and that's where using the decision aid can be helpful, because one of the things I'm thinking, if that would be the case, then I'd be sitting down with somebody who's having to face that decision. I think part of it might be around articulating what is the benefit of continuous treatment. So there might be a difference in opinion in how the patient feels. You know, the woman herself is thinking, I'm not going to benefit from this that much. And the husband feels that, you know, even though there's a 5% chance, I'm just hypothetically saying that there, let's say there's a 5% chance this is going to help, or a 50%, whatever it might be. And he's like, you know what, if whatever it is, whatever that percentage is, I want us to go for it. Maybe what the woman is thinking is, well, yes, while I'm on treatment, and sometimes that's the piece around, I agree with that, and I want to also go for that 5%, let's say, or 1%, or 10%, whatever it might be. So sometimes there's agreement around that piece, that however large or small the benefit might be, you want to go for that. So often there might be agreement around that. Where there might be disagreement is, while I'm on treatment, I cannot do X. And X matters more to me than the likelihood of getting benefit from option. So let's say option A is to continue chemotherapy. Option B is to stop chemotherapy. And while I'm feeling well, I'm going to go on a trip. And you and I are going to go to Paris, because we've always talked about going to Paris. And to me, right now, going to Paris is more important to me than the risk of benefiting from treatment A to continue chemotherapy. And then you can start moving into, okay, so when we come back from Paris, what do we do? And so sometimes, and that's where there's sometimes articulating that piece, and then it might be around, so sometimes the discussion is around, let's delay starting chemotherapy because I really want to do this, 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 and this. Or and that, building these memories and having opportunity to do that and feeling well and my quality of life is more important. And sometimes it's around articulating what is the benefit of continuing to treat, or what's the harm sometimes of delaying treatment. And sometimes it's what's the consequences of choosing option A versus choosing option B. So going on treatment versus going on the trip, if you go on treatment, you might never get the trip. If you go on the trip, you might still have the option of going on treatment when you come back. So sometimes it's about exploring those things.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And so often it's finding what are the pieces that people agree with and what are the pieces that people kind of disagree or haven't seen or don't see, and what the perspective of each individual.
Yeah, so technically you should really ask a third party sometimes to come and help you.
Sometimes you do. Sometimes that's why I'm suggesting, you know, a social worker would be a good person to bring in, because they certainly have those skills around counseling and supporting people. And so they might not have experience with using decision aids, but they can certainly support people in having those tough decisions. The other piece is around sometimes information. So that perception, right? What's the benefit versus the harm, and people's perception around that. And sometimes just having that discussion around what's important and why are you choosing this one versus that one is helpful. I'm not saying that doing this helps all the time, but certainly is helpful. It's one way of improving that communication piece. And I brought something on the table earlier that when we started the talk was around having those difficult decisions. And one of the things that I've suggested to patients, and I don't know whether or not they've actually, if they do that or not, but sometimes that's helpful, is, you know, if you talk about these tough decisions, then you're not being positive. And so we see that often where these discussions get delayed and delayed and delayed and delayed because even though we see that our patients, our women who are going to support groups are wanting to have these discussions, they're certainly having some of the tough discussions in the support group, they're not necessarily having those discussions with their family member because of not wanting to add sadness in the family. So one of the things I suggest is present it like a box. right? It's kind of predetermined or presented as, you and I need to have a discussion with you today or tomorrow or next week or on Friday, and it's a tough discussion. But I want us to talk about X, Y, and Z, and I need us to do that, and I need us to do that for an hour. And we're going to talk about it, and at the end of our hour, we can then decide what we're going to do next, whether we never talk about this again, how we move to the next step. But because we're going to talk about this tough thing, so it might be advanced directives, it doesn't mean that I'm going to start talking about dying all the time. I just want to talk about it at one point, and sometimes having that, and so for family members, and sometimes it's the other way around, right? It might be that the family wants to have this discussion. Certainly we've seen that, right? The family is telling us, you know, we can't talk to Mom, or I can't talk to my wife about anything. I just wish that Mom would start building memory boxes for the grandkids, or whatever it might be, or for her own children. But you know, we're aiming for the cure here, and that's the only thing that we can be talking about is the cure. So, or it's the family member who's going down that path. So then, having that precise, let's talk about it for a little bit, and then we can put it aside and never go there again. It's better than saying we never go there. At least you get there once, and the people who want to go there and can't have their needs met, and then who knows where it goes after that. People might realize, you know, what's the worst thing that can happen? And you get into that, you know, we're going to talk about it. It might be bad. We might cry, and then we can move on.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
Very good.
Do you have another question?
No, I don't. No, I don't. This has been very good.
Well, good. I'm glad it was helpful.
Yeah, that's great. Do you want to add anything else, Lynn? Or?
Nope, I'm good.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
And thank you very much for Ovarian Cancer Canada to ask me to do this. It actually dawned on me as I was preparing the talk that I was now going with OCC to present on patient decision making, and I hadn't really looked at how this might be something, or I have thought about it for us here at the Ottawa Hospital, and thought about it from developing a decision aid, but never really thought about, you know what, before we get to that piece, which is complicated and evidence-based and having to do a review of the literature and all of that, that there's actually a very simple, easy step that we can do is just to talk about making tough decisions and doing this specific talk. So I'll now be doing this talk at our support group here at the Ottawa Hospital. So thank you for asking me, because it made me see something that I wasn't even seeing as a healthcare provider.
Oh, that's great. We always love it when it kind of spins off into other things.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. That's really great.
And Lynn, can I just say that the last teleconference that Ovarian Cancer Canada did was on genetic counseling.
Is that right?
Maybe you should check that out.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, we had one with Mary McCollum.
Is that right?
Right.
Yeah, cancer.
Well, I knew that there was one on decision making, and I was trying to find a decision that I thought, oh, which one do I
Yeah, there's so many, yeah.
There's so many, and I just kind of picked that one, and I thought, oh, at the end of the day, I know that for sure, if you go back to the decision aid piece, and I guess if you were there, you all know that going for genetic counseling doesn't mean that you need to have genetic testing. And so that's for sure what we tell our patients who are debating about that decision. Just go for the counseling first, because you don't need to decide, getting to counseling doesn't mean that you're getting tested.
That's right.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. So, and the genetic counselor have the training to help people make that decision. So, all right.
Yeah, so I'd like to thank Rojan for her participation. I would also like to express my sincere thanks to Lynn Delikar for her presentation regarding decision making. If you would like to listen in to this, or you want to share this session with friends or colleagues, it will be available on YouTube next week. The next Caring Voices sessions will be on November 23rd, 2010 at 8 p.m. on ovarian cancer recurrence with Dr. Christopher Guidi. The following one will be on the bowel side effects of chemo on December 1st, 2010 at 7 p.m. Also, I would like to remind you to complete and send back your evaluation as soon as possible. Your feedback is important to us. Thank you for being part of today's session, and we hope you will participate in our next sessions. Have a nice afternoon. Thank you, ladies.